So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marisa Kaczmarzyk. I am the Director of Client Services here at the New Canadian Centre, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the session this afternoon, which is working effectively with interpreters and interpretation tools. We have two presenters today and a lot of materials, so I'm just going to move us forward to get going on this session this afternoon. Before I do that, I'd like us to just take a moment to reflect on where we are located today, to think about where you are in your office, in your homes, in your communities, the relationships that you have developed with the land around you and with the people around you, both in the past, in the present, and into the future. And in reflecting about that, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we're located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We respectfully acknowledge that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure our health and integrity for generations to come. So today's session, as I mentioned, is focusing on improving our communications through the use of working with interpreters and with interpretation tools. Our primary purpose is looking at interpreters today, but we'll also be looking at some tools in case you're in a situation where you don't have an interpreter available to you. I'll be monitoring the chat for any questions or comments, and the session is actually divided into two. We have two presenters, and we'll see how the time goes. I'll try and stop between each presenter so that you have a time for questions. But as I said, we have a lot of content, so we'll invite you to have questions, and then we'll see how the time goes. So to begin, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. And forgive me because I'm not that tech savvy, but I'm going to try and, all right, I got it. So Ohayla Al-Khalid immigrated to Canada in 1996 and is currently the manager of language interpretation services at the Kitchener Waterloo Multicultural Centre. This center has been providing trained interpreters for 30 years to various service agencies in Waterloo, Wellington, Brant regions, and the surrounding townships of that area. Ohayla is also the instructor of the language interpretation training program at Conestoga College. She's committed to the provision of professional interpretation services and has worked with provincial network of providers towards this goal. I'd like to warmly welcome Ohayla to our region, to the Peterborough area, and thank you, Ohayla, for taking the time to come and share some of your experiences with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for having the time to listen to me. I know you have busy schedules, guys. So I'm going to talk about interpreters. I'll give you a bit of an overview about the role of an interpreter, the training that interpreters go through. I will show you some videos, little segments because of the time constraint, just to illustrate how to work with interpreters in various settings. And then we will talk about what to do, how can you, like feedback. Your feedback is very important, even though you're not speaking the same language as the interpreter and your client, but you are going to be able to figure out if something is wrong going on or something doesn't feel right, as well as some ways to, tips to make it more effective to working with interpreters and less costly. There are different ways that we have been working with different agencies locally in our area, in the Waterloo region, where it's limited resources that they have. They want to stretch the dollars as much as they, I mean, not just dollars, they want to stretch the pennies as much as they can. So we will give you some hints on certain things that you can do to make it less costly for you. So I will share my screen, and I will start with a PowerPoint presentation, go through that, and then we will watch some videos together. I'm not quite sure, Marissa, would you like guys to wait until the end and then I'll answer your questions, or do you want to jump in between? I'm not quite sure. How would you like to run it?
It's whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to wait,
Okay.
or if you want questions as you go.
Okay, so why don't we write the questions in the chat, and then Marissa will monitor it, and then we will answer at the end, just in case, so I'll be able to show you everything I need to show you. Okay, so I am sharing my screen. I hope everybody can see it clearly. So the primary role of an interpreter is to deliver the message between two people who don't have a common language as faithfully as possible. And we are saying as faithfully as possible because there are certain concepts, there are certain words, there are certain things that are more cultural, that it's very difficult to interpret from one language to another. The interpreter will try to find an equivalent, but sometimes there are no equivalent because it's more unique to, let's say, to Canadians as opposite to Arabic or to Farsi cultures and so on. So they deliver the message. They do not change the message. They do not add their own opinion. They do not add explanations. So it's like a mailman. I tell them in the training, a mailman comes in the older days before technology, they put your mail in your mailbox. They don't open it and try to, if it's a bad news, to break down the bad news to you or try to alter the message. They just drop it in and they leave. And that's what an interpreter is supposed to do. The interpreter will, two main things they have to do is listen to your message, understand your message, find an equivalent in the other language, preserving the meaning of your message and preserving the register of the message. So if you are speaking in very high technical, using technical words, complex words, they are going to find an equivalent in the other language. The responsibility is not to simplify it and make sure that the person understands what you're saying. It is your responsibility to make sure that the person understands it by using a language that's more simple, maybe lower register than a high technical register. Now, interpreters have to go through, first, we need to test them, but make sure that they are fluent in English, as well as they are fluent in their mother tongue, the language that they're going to interpret into. Also, when we do interviews, we test their attitudes because we want to employ people who are non-judgmental. We all carry certain prejudices, certain views of things, certain opinions on things that we want to make sure that if you are working in the field of interpretation, these biases are on the side. You are going to have to remain impartial at all times. They have to go through a training, extensive training. It used to be 60 hours. It extended to 90 hours. Now it's 125 hours. And now actually there are colleges that are offering the programs, and it's 180 hours to get a certificate from the college. They have to commit to continuous skill development workshops. So they need to upgrade their skills. Language changes, they have to be up to par with the language. Also, they are not experts in every field, so they need to increase their knowledge of medical field terminologies, maybe legal field terminologies, different things, because they cannot, it's a lifelong kind of learning process. Also, we provide interpreters with support. They are more than welcome to discuss how they felt during an assignment, not to talk about the details of the assignment. And if they need to seek help, for example, our agency, we provide 6 free sessions of counseling with the local counseling agencies for our interpreters who have been interpreting in very highly emotional situations. So that our interpreters, we have the contract to deliver interpretation for victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking. And sometimes our interpreters get affected, especially around sexual violence. We have had to put some of our interpreters through counseling because they started feeling what is called vicarious trauma. So they hear the trauma and they feel that they have gone through it and they are not able to sleep and they are struggling. So this is very important, because if we are going to provide services for you, if people and other agencies need to provide services for you, they need to provide you with interpreters who are mentally and physically capable of doing the job, and their emotions, they are healthy and they are able to handle their emotions if they are triggered while they are providing the services for you and your clients. Also, interpreters have to take a language test. They have to be fluent in both English and the language that they are interpreting between. Also, they have to have a police check working with the vulnerable sector. They are working with children, they are working with victims. This is a specific, more detailed police check, and they have to abide by a code of ethics and standards of practice. So code of ethics, we're talking about accuracy and fidelity, confidentiality, remaining impartial, respecting people, not only in terms of how they are deal with people, it's showing up on time, for example, that's showing respect to the people that you're working with, maintaining boundaries, role boundaries, and accountability, professionalism, also continued competence. So if they go to an assignment and they find that is beyond their skills, then they cannot just say, okay, I'm going to avoid these kind of assignments. They need to upgrade their skills to be able to do these kind of assignments. Now, I am going to stop right now. I'm going to show you a video, and these videos are segments on how to work with an interpreter in a group session, how to work with an interpreter during a medical appointment, because there are three kind of times that the interpreter is going to interrupt. I would like you to pay attention to that, because it talks to the role of the interpreter and the role of the service provider, which you are. Also, there is another segment that I would like you to look at the expression of the interpreter and how the interpreter is interpreting, because there will be subtitles. That will show you when an interpreter is not comfortable with the subject matter that he is interpreting, and that gives you a clue that we should not continue with this session, because the interpreter's emotions, the interpreter's biases are interfering. Also, we're going to show you how to do interpretation over the phone. So you'll be exposed to different ways of working with interpreters, and in those I will make comments as well at the end of every session, or if you have a question specifically, we can take that on from those sessions. We want to discuss the video together as much as possible.
Hola, Julia. Sí, soy Julia. ¿Usted debe ser Luisa, la intérprete? Sí, así es, de Community Interpreter Services. Un placer conocerla. Sí, igualmente. Voy a ser su intérprete en la sesión de HIV y SIDA. ¿Ha trabajado alguna vez con un intérprete? No, estoy un poco nerviosa. Bueno, déjame explicarle. Me sentaré detrás de usted, hacia un costado, para poder interpretar en voz baja y no molestar a los otros. Si necesita hacer una pregunta o hacer un comentario, levante su mano y yo interpretaré todo lo que usted diga. Interpretaré todo lo que oiga lo mejor que pueda e indicaré qué palabras estoy interpretando señalando con mi mano así. Cuando interprete, usaré la primera persona, es decir, que interpretaré como si fuera yo la que habla. Permaneceré imparcial y guardaré todo lo que se diga de manera confidencial. El revelar. Si me ve tomar notas, son para refrescar mi memoria y las destruiré al final de la sesión. Si necesito clarificación o no puedo oír lo que se dice, pues puedo interrumpir levantando mi mano así. ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, ¿tengo su permiso para ser su intérprete en esta sesión? Sí, por supuesto. Gracias. Perfecto. Hay otra intérprete que trabaja con el grupo hoy. Se llama Janet y habla cantonés e interpretará para otras dos personas. Ambas nos presentaremos al grupo antes de que las facilitadoras comiencen y explicaremos cómo trabajaremos de manera similar a lo que le acabo de decir. Entonces, si no le importa, por favor, espere aquí mientras voy a decir a las facilitadoras que estoy aquí. Ok, ¿de acuerdo? Oh, hi. I'm Luisa. I'm the Spanish interpreter from Community Interpreter Services. Oh, hi. It's nice to meet you. I'm Danielle. Oh, hi, Danielle.
Hi, Louisa. I'm Susan. Thanks for being here.
Oh, hi, Susan. No, no problem. Thank you. And thank you both for emailing me the information you'll be covering. It really helped me to prepare. And I want to let you know there's another interpreter working today. So I'll be introducing both of us to the group. And I will leave some time before you begin just to do so. So, you know, everybody knows who we are and how we'll be working. Oh, yeah, that's not a problem at all. Just so you know, we'll be alternating about every 10 minutes or so. I'll be going first, and the session will probably be about an hour in total. But if you have any questions, if we're talking too fast or you can't hear, just please let us know. Okay, thank you. Well, it also helps us to do our job, you know, if just one person can speak at a time. Oh, yeah, we can manage that. I mean, it's helpful for the whole group. So did you want me to introduce you once you've been seated? Sure, perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can I have your attention, please? Before we begin, we actually have a couple of interpreters in the room who will be interpreting for clients during this session. I'm going to ask one of the interpreters, Louisa, just to explain the process. So go ahead, Louisa. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Luisa. I'm the Spanish-speaking interpreter from Community Interpreter Services. There is another interpreter working today. Her name is Janet, and she will be interpreting Cantonese. We will be interpreting everything said in the room to the best of our ability. We will interpret in the first person, so please do not address the interpreter directly. Okay, we will remain impartial and we keep everything we see and hear confidential unless we are required by law to disclose information. We will be whispering our interpreting so as not to disturb the rest of the group. So if our voices get too loud and you are unable to hear, please let the facilitator know and we will try to reduce our volume. If the people we are interpreting for have any questions, we will interpret them for everyone. If the interpreters are unable to hear or can't understand what is being said, then we might interrupt like this and ask for clarification or repetition. Okay, if we take notes are to help us remember what is said, and we will destroy them at the end of the session. So is everyone okay with Janet and myself being here and providing interpretation? Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Louisa, for that explanation. And as she says, it's important that everybody be a part of the session. So we really ask you.
So in this session, you will notice that there is one Spanish interpreter for the Spanish client who doesn't understand English, and there is a Cantonese interpreter or Mandarin interpreter in the back with two people. The interpreter in a mixed session like this will be able only to whisper interpreting for two people at a time, unless the whole session is run, for example, let's say everybody in the room speaks Mandarin, let's say, then there will be a Mandarin interpreter standing with the facilitator and helping the facilitator interpret whatever she is or he is saying. So this is just one example of a group setting where you have maybe multiple interpreters. So I'm going to fast forward to the next segment. So this session is, we have an interpreter who is at a doctor's office and the doctor is meeting with the patient. And this is Vietnamese interpreter.
Lần cuối của bà là khi nào? Tôi không nhớ rõ, ít nhất là 3 năm trước. I can't remember, at least 3 years ago.
We should schedule that soon. Let the receptionist know when you leave that I want to see you for a physical.
Vậy chúng ta cần phải làm hẹn ngay. Trước khi bà ra về, hãy nói với cô thư ký của tôi rằng tôi muốn khám sức khỏe cho bà. Được. Bằng giờ này được không? Okay, can it be the same time?
That shouldn't be a problem.
Tôi không nghĩ có vấn đề gì đâu. Cảm ơn. Thank you.
Could you ask her if she completed the patient form?
Cô có thể hỏi xem bà ấy đã điền xong hồ sơ bệnh nhân chưa? Thông dịch viên xin có vài lời để nói với bác sĩ. The interpreter need to interrupt. Please speak directly to your patient and not to me. When you speak directly to your patient, I can interpret the messages faithfully and in the first person. I will now let her know what I just did.
Okay.
Thông dịch viên cần ngắt lời để yêu cầu bác sĩ nói chuyện trực tiếp với bà chứ không nói với thông dịch viên. Như vậy sẽ giúp thông dịch viên thông dịch một cách chính xác và thông dịch viên sẽ dùng ngôn thứ nhất khi dịch. Chúng ta tiếp tục. Please continue.
Did you complete the patient form, Mrs. Wynn?
Bà có điền hồ sơ bệnh nhân chưa bà Nguyễn?
Chưa, tôi không hiểu. Ông ấy hỏi những chi tiết rất riêng tư.
No, I couldn't understand it. You want very private information.
The form needs to be completed. It's important because it allows me to know your medical history and to know about your family and conditions that you may be prone to.
Hồ sơ
For
bệnh nhân
instance,
cần
if your
được
mother
điền đầy
has
đủ.
diabetes
Điều
or
đó
your
rất
father
quan
has a
trọng
heart
bởi
condition,
vì tôi cần
it's important that I
biết
know
quá
that.
trình sức khỏe của
The more I
bà
know about your
cũng
background, the
như
better I
người
can
trong gia
assess your
đình.
medical condition.
Ví dụ,
So I will need you to
the interpreter need to interrupt. In order to ensure everything is interpreted, please speak clearly in the short sentences and at a slower pace. Please repeat what you just said. Thông dịch viên xin ngắt lời để giúp cho thông dịch viên phiên dịch đầy đủ mọi lời nói. Xin ông nói câu ngắn và nói chậm lại, và tôi yêu cầu ông lặp lại điều ông vừa nói.
Yo.
Hi, Boo.
Are you in a
important to
meeting?
complete the form because it allows me to
I was
know.
super late because my other meeting went off. I'm trying to get some of the tips from Donna.
Hồ sơ bệnh nhân rất quan trọng vì nó giúp
Yes, I didn't
tôi
see
tìm
that.
hiểu quá trình sức
I'm
khỏe
too
của bà.
well for you.
If your mother has diabetes or your father a heart condition, I need to know that so I can make a better assessment.
Nếu mẹ bà có bệnh tiểu đường hoặc cha bà có bệnh tim, điều đó rất quan trọng và giúp tôi chẩn đoán tốt hơn.
Ở nước tôi, người ta không tiết lộ những thông tin rất riêng tư.
I understand. It's just where I'm from. You don't give personal information.
I see. I want to assure you that all of your information will be kept strictly confidential.
Tôi hiểu, tôi muốn bảo đảm với bà rằng tất cả những thông tin sẽ được giữ bí mật.
No one will be allowed to see it except those people helping you, like myself and other doctors. It's the law.
Không ai được phép đọc ngoại trừ những người giúp đỡ bà như tôi đây hoặc những bác sĩ khác. Luật là như vậy.
Cảm ơn sự giải thích của ông. Tôi sẽ điền hồ sơ.
Thank you for your explaining. I will fill it out.
Could you help her complete the form? I'll be back in a few minutes.
Cô có thể giúp bà ta điền hồ sơ được không? Tôi sẽ trở lại liền. The interpreter needs to clarify something. Thông dịch viên cần ngắt lời để giải thích rằng tôi không thể ngồi một mình giúp bà điền hồ sơ được. Please make your request directly to your patient and not to me. Also, the interpreter cannot be left alone with the patient, and I cannot help her to complete the form. But I can side translate the document and interpret the answers. That way, you or another staff person can complete the form. If the patient has any question, you can provide explanation.
Okay, let me get my secretary to sit with you so she can write down the information.
Vậy thì để thư ký của tôi ngồi lại với cô và cô ấy sẽ điền hồ sơ.
Hi, Angela. Could you come in here and help Mrs. Wynn complete the patient form? Thanks.
Chào Angela, cô có thể vào đây để giúp bà Nguyễn điền hồ sơ được không? Cảm ơn.
Hi, Angela. Could you please write down Mrs. Wynn's information as the interpreter interprets it?
Sure. Chào Angela, cô có thể ghi lại thông tin của bà Nguyễn trong khi cô thông dịch viên dịch lại. Please go ahead. Hãy bắt đầu. Hồ sơ bệnh nhân, tên, họ.
Tên tôi là Lý L Y, họ Nguyễn N G U Y A N.
My name is Lý L Y. My last name is Nguyễn N G U Y E N. Địa chỉ, điện thoại và hòm thư điện tử.
Địa chỉ của tôi là 767 Lombard Crescent, phòng 604 Toronto, M6W 4L1. Số phone tôi là 555 591 3365. Tôi không có hộp thư điện tử.
The interpreter need to verify the information. Tôi sẽ đọc lại những chi tiết, xin bà kiểm chứng lại. Địa chỉ của bà là 767 đường Lombard, phòng số 604, Toronto, M6W 4L1. Số phone của bà là 555 591 3365. Có đúng không ạ?
Đúng.
My address is 767
Lombard Crescent, apartment 604, Toronto, M6W 4L1. My phone number is
555-591-3365. I don't have an email.
Sorry, I just need to get a file.
Xin lỗi, tôi chỉ cần lấy hồ sơ thôi.
She was diagnosed with pericarditis in March by Dr. Samuels. Is she presenting with different symptoms?
Bác sĩ Samuel hồi tháng 3 vừa rồi, cô ta có những
I
triệu
think she
chứng
needs
khác
to be
này.
retested.
Tôi nghĩ là cô ta cần phải được xét nghiệm lại.
Are you translating my conversation?
Cô phiên dịch lại cuộc đối thoại của tôi à? Yes, the interpreter is responsible for interpreting everything that is said in the room as long as it's audible to me.
Sorry, I'll continue my call outside. Just let me know when you're finished, please.
The interpreter needs to let the patient know what happened. Vâng, thông dịch viên có trách nhiệm dịch tất cả những lời được nói trong phòng này.
Please continue.
So you will notice that the interpreter interrupted the process multiple times. One time when the doctor was talking non-stop, long sentences, and the interpreter is not able to keep up. So she had to interrupt and ask him to speak at a slower pace and using short sentences. Also, the interpreter in this case interrupted and explained what's happening because in the introduction, it says everything that you say or everything that's being said will be interpreted, which means even if the client, for example, has a support person with them and they're having a side conversation, the interpreter is obligated, as long as it's audible to her, to interpret that, as well as if the doctor themselves take a phone call or something else is going on, the interpreter has to interpret what's being said to the patient. So we recommend that if there is something that you don't want to say, you don't say it in front of the patient in that appointment once the appointment started. Also, the interpreter interrupted when she was asked to fill out forms. The interpreters are not allowed to fill out forms. They can sight translate the questions and sight translate the answers to the questions in the forms, and someone else from that office that has to write that on the form. So these are 3 examples of what could go wrong in a session, as well as you will notice that the interpreter has to be transparent at all times. So whatever is the interpreter says to one person has to interpret and say to the other person. So anytime the interpreter interrupted, she made the other person aware of why she interrupted and how she dealt with that situation. Okay. Now I'm going to move to a different section where I want you to look at, as well as reading the subtitles, I want you to look at the facial expression of the interpreter.
Meron ba kayong naramdamang kakaiba? Wala. Meron ba kayong naramdamang kakaiba? Wala. Wala kaming naramdaman.
Not this one, it's just, I can't get to the exact point. It will move on in a second. Okay, this one.
So you said you're married and have 3 children. How long have you been with your wife, and what are your children's gender and age?
Ulisema umeoa na una watoto 3. Umekuwa na mke wako kwa muda gani, na watoto wako ni wa jinsia gani na wana umri gani?
Nilioa miaka 8 iliyopita. Nina watoto wa kike 3. Zena ana miaka 3, Fatuma ana 5 na Mariam ana 7.
I got married 8 years ago. I've got 3 girls. Zena is 3, Fatuma is 5, and Mariam is 7.
Do they know that you're HIV positive?
Wanajua kwamba una virusi vya ukimwi?
Mke wangu anajua, lakini watoto hawajui.
My wife does, but the kids don't.
Have you had sex with partners other than your wife since you've been married?
Umewahi kuingiliana kimwili na watu wengine zaidi ya mke wako tangu mlipoana?
Haya, kuhusu?
Why do you want to know?
It's the law to notify everyone that you've had sex with that they've been exposed and should get tested.
Lazima mweleze wote ambao umeingiliana nao kimwili. Asiwe utakwenda jela. Mweleze habari zote kuhusu washiriki, watu wengine waliojamiana nao.
Nishakuwa na 10 wengine.
He said 10, he said 10 others.
Were they all women, men, or both?
Wote walikuwa wanawake, wanaume, au wote wawili?
Nimewatomba wote, wanaume na wanawake.
Doesn't remember.
I need to know the names and genders of the people that you've had sex with. We don't need to say that it was you, but they need to know that they were exposed and that they should get tested.
Usiposema utaenda jela, mweleze habari zote sasa hivi. Wanaume wangapi, wanawake wangapi?
Wanawake 6 na wanaume 4.
He's been with 6 women and 4 men.
Were any of them prostitutes?
Wangapi walikuwa machangudoa kama wewe?
Msema nini?
Wangapi walikuwa malaya?
Wanaume 2 wa mwisho.
Yes, he paid to have sex with 2 men.
Can you tell me what the type of sex that you had? Was it anal, oral, or both?
Anataka kujua ulifanya nini na hao machangudoa.
Tulichofanya ni kunyonyana mboro na kufirana.
Both ways. Like an animal.
Okay, I think we need to stop this for a moment. It seems that you're having a problem interpreting the information. Is that so?
Sorry, I just find this very hard. I can't help feeling disgusted. How could he do this to his wife and children and with men? This is unacceptable in my culture.
Let's stop this session.
So this is an example where the interpreter is not comfortable. The interpreter not only started to omit some of the information because he's not comfortable saying the words, or sometimes he will add his own opinion and judgment into the sessions. So this is one way also that you can tell from the facial expression of the interpreter that the interpreter is not able to remain impartial. So impartiality is not only when you are interpreting everything that's being said without including your own personal opinion. Impartiality has to be also with your facial expression. You have to show no reaction to what you're hearing, whether you're shocked or disgusted or whatever your feelings are at the time. You're not supposed to show that. You are supposed to be neutral also within, in your facial expression. So I'm going to move on to the last segment, which will show how to do interpretation over the phone.
Hello,
Hello, may I speak to Danielle?
this is Danielle.
Hello, Danielle. This is Adam, the Arabic interpreter from Community Interpreter Services. You arranged for me to provide interpretation for you and your client, Murad.
Yes, hi Adam. Thanks for being so prompt.
No problem. Before you connect with Murad, I'd like to explain how I'll be working. Once you connect to Murad, I'd also like to explain the same to him.
That's perfect. I've never actually worked with a professional interpreter before. Usually Murad brings a friend or a family member, but I'm not always sure that they understand what I'm saying.
I want you to know that I will accurately interpret all the conversation and be completely impartial throughout. I will keep everything set confidential unless I'm required by law to disclose information. Any notes I take will be destroyed after the phone call. I will be interpreting in the first person, so please speak directly to Murad and not to me. I may need to interrupt you or Murad to clarify something, and will do so by saying the interpreter needs to interrupt. When I have completed interpreting a statement, I will say go ahead, so that you know you may continue. I will be using a consecutive mode of interpreting, so it would be helpful if you speak in short sentences and then pause to allow me to interpret what you have said to Murad. Is it okay for me to interpret?
Yeah, certainly. Can I connect with him now?
Yes, but just to clarify before you connect, who will begin the conversation?
Good point. Murad knows some English, so why don't I introduce myself and just let him know that you're on the line, and then you can introduce yourself to him. I'll just put you on hold and reconnect when I have him on the line.
Hello?
Hi, can I speak to Murad?
I am Murad.
Hi, Murad. It's Danielle from the clinic. How are you?
Hi, Miss Daniel. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I have an Arabic interpreter on the line. His name is Adam.
أنا كويسة شكرا. معايا على الخط مترجم فوري اسمه آدم. Go ahead.
He's just going to take a minute to explain how you'll be working with us today. Is that okay, Murad?
وهو هياخد دقيقة علشان يشرح لك هيشتغل النهاردة معانا ازاي. ماشي يا مراد؟
اوكي.
Please go ahead, Adam.
أهلا مراد. أنا اسمي آدم وأنا هترجم لك النهاردة خلال مكالمتك على التليفون مع دانيال. أنا خلاص شرحت لدانيال هشتغل معاكم ازاي ودلوقتي أحب أشرح لك أنت اللي أنا قلته لك. أنا بشتغل مع الهيئة دي اسمها Community Interpreter Services ووظيفتي إن أنا أساعدكم تتكلموا مع بعض. عشان أقدر أعمل كده فأنا هترجم كل شيء أنت تقوله للغة التانية على قد ما أقدر من دقة، فأرجو إنك تتكلم في جمل قصيرة وبعدين تقف علشان تديني أنا فرصة إن أنا أترجم اللي أنت قلته لدانيال. أنا هكون في منتهى الحياد لأن أنا مش في وضع إن أنا أنحاز لا لأمر ولا لشخص ما، وأنا هحافظ على سرية كل اللي بيتقال خلال المكالمة إلا إذا طلب مني بأمر القانون إن أنا أصرح بالمعلومات. احتمال إن أنا أدون شوية ملاحظات خلال المكالمة دي هتساعدني إن أنا أفتكر اللي أنت قلته، لكن أنا هعدمها في نهاية المكالمة دي. إذا احتجت إن أنا أقاطعكم لأي سبب هقوم قايل للمترجم يحتاج لمقاطعة الكلام، وبمجرد إن أنا انتهي من ترجمة اللي اتقال هقوم قايل اتفضل علشان تعرفوا إنكم ممكن تكملوا الكلام. وأنا بترجم هستخدم صيغة المتكلم، فعشان كده عايزكم تكلموا بعض على طول. فاهم هنمشي إزاي؟
اعتقد انك شرحت كويس، شكرا.
طيب هتسمح لي ان انا اترجم لك؟
طبعا.
اوكي، انا هقول لدانيال ان انا شرحت لك العمليه وانها تقدر تبتدي المحادثه.
اوكي.
Hi Daniel, I've just finished explaining to Murad the process. He said he understood, so you can begin your session.
Thank you, Adam. Hello again, Murad. Thanks for agreeing to doing this over the phone.
اهلا بيك مره ثانيه يا مراد وشكرا على موافقتك ان احنا نعمل كده في التليفون. اتفضل.
ما فيش داعي للشكر.
No problem, go ahead.
Murad, how are you feeling today?
So, okay, let me just take this out. So these are examples on how to work with interpreters in different settings. And it's a little bit harder over the phone because the interpreter needs to prompt each person on when to start and so on, because sometimes the interpreter maybe is thinking of a word and how to interpret something from one language to another. So she or he might pause for a bit. So it's very important for the interpreter to prompt you or the client when they are ready for you to say the next segment. So these are the videos that I wanted to show. I'm going to share my screen one more time and go back to the presentation. And we will continue. So this ID card, it's very foldable, and actually we get funding from the same ministry as MCIS, and they were in charge of this project. So if you are working with MCIS, you can request that ID card. It lists all different languages. So if you have a walk-in or you have a client, you're not able, sometimes the client is able to communicate with you with little words and you are able to find out what language they speak. But sometimes if they don't, it is written in both English and the other language, and they can point to their language. So it's very beneficial. So Marissa, if you're not able to get a hold of these from MCIS because it's been years ago, we are still having ours locally in print. So I can print new ones and I can ship it to you guys and you can distribute it. But if you're working with MCIS, they will have their address on it, their phone number on it, and so on. So it's much easier because you're working with them directly for interpretation. So consecutive interpreting is question answer. So somebody will say something, they will pause, and then the interpreter is able to interpret. And that's usually in an interview session, and we've seen an example. It can happen over the phone, it can happen face-to-face. Now, remember, when you are working with an interpreter, you need to use shorter sentences and you need to pause in between. Interpretation requires very active listening and memory retention, and the interpreters are able to retain a lot of sentences, but not to the extent where you are continuously talking non-stop. Now, please make sure that you give the interpreter a chance to introduce herself. or himself, because that's how they set the scenes on how they are going to be working. They are supposed to remain impartial. They will interrupt if they need clarification. They will be interpreting in the first person, and they will interpret the meaning and the intent of your message, preserving the meaning and preserving the register that you are using. Now, you do not, when working with the interpreter does not engage in private conversations. She should not be having a conversation with you without the other person, the client, being aware of what you said. And at the same time, they should not be having a side conversation with the client and you are not aware of what they're saying. They are not supposed to offer their opinion. They're not supposed to offer cultural explanations. If I ask you right now, can you define, I'm new to Canada, could you tell me about the Canadian culture? Are you able to explain the Canadian culture for me? Very hard, because it's a combination of so many ethnicities, so many cultures that have come together, moved to Canada, lived here, and you cannot really explain it. And the same thing for when you are trying to find out certain things about your client's culture, because the interpreter might be from the same country, they speak the same language, but culture is different even within the same family. It is values. It is how much you travel, how much you are exposed to the outside world. You add to your culture all the time. So it's very hard to put it on the shoulder of the interpreter to explain culture for you. Anything you need to know, you ask the client directly. So allow the interpreter to introduce themselves, speak directly to your client, not to the interpreter, using short sentences. If you need to translate certain things, you need to go back to the agency. The interpreters sometimes are good interpreters, but might not be good translators. So for example, in our agency, I have a list of translators that I rely on, and I have a list of interpreters that I rely on. Not necessarily both of them can do both jobs perfectly. And minimize using your own jargons, abbreviations that we use in your work. A lot of the idioms and are more Canadian culture. It's very hard to translate from one language to another. So make it as simple as possible, and that will be more effective and faster and easier on you and the interpreter to communicate. Now, let's talk about how can the service be cost effective. Now, anytime you are requesting an interpreter, if you have some documents or some articles or some information, you can send it to the interpreter ahead of time. And part of the job of interpreters is doing research of the assignment they're going to go on. So this is not something that's going to cost your agency, but the interpreter should come prepared with the language, with the terminology. It could be as simple as referring to your website, or you could tell them what is just an overview of what the assignment is going to be about. What are you going to talk about? What kind of subject you're going to talk about? And they will do their research ahead of time. So that will make the assignment go a little bit faster because the interpreter will have done their job ahead of time. Not have the interpreter wait, because when you book an interpreter, let's say for 9 o'clock, at least with our agency, I'm not quite sure with the other agencies that you work with. If you book for 9 o'clock and you start the appointment at 9:15, you're going to be billed from 9 o'clock. That's when the interpreter showed up, and that's where the billing is going to start. Pre-book phone appointments. So for example, I know that you work with over the phone as well. So for me, sometimes when I don't have the language available locally, I work with Rio. So what I do is, if I know exactly the date and time of the appointment, I will pre-book it. It's still over the phone, but it's cheaper when I pre-book it than actually using immediate over the phone on the same day. So for example, there was a farm that they needed to interview Thai workers. I didn't have a Thai interpreter. I called Rio, and if I had them use it right there and then, it will be about $150 to $200 more expensive than actually I pre-booked it for over the phone. But I told them I wanted a 3 hours or 4 hours from this time to this time, and it was close to $200 cheaper. Make use of message relays. Sometimes you want some information, very simple information. You don't need to book an appointment, or you don't need to bring the client into your office. All what you have to do is ask the agency to have an interpreter relay a message. And that is cheaper than actually doing interpretation over the phone or actually bringing the client in while you only need an answer to a question you have. Also make use of group interpreting. So locally here, they noticed, like, for example, we had an increase at a certain period of time, we had an increase of people who speak Spanish who have been developing diabetes. So the diabetic education was done in group for Spanish, for Farsi, for Arabic, for whatever. And this way they hired an interpreter for 2 hours, as opposed to having all these people coming in and having 4 or 5 interpreters at a time, every time, or an interpreter per client every time they meet with the client. So anytime you are able to gather, if it's the same material you are distributing, if it's the same educational material that you are going to share, and it is, you notice that there is like, okay, I could get the Spanish patients together, I could get the Arabic patients together. Let's do it this way, and it's cheaper on you and less expensive on you. Also, make use of translations. There was at St. Mary's Hospital here in KW, there was a large increase of heart surgery among the Portuguese community. So what they did, everything related to the heart surgery, post, pre-op, all of that, they had it translated into Portuguese, and it was very beneficial. They paid once for it. Yes, and translation is expensive, it's not cheap. And some languages are more expensive than others, but they noticed, okay, instead of hiring an interpreter and going through the booklet and pre and op every time with every patient, let's have it ready and we can distribute it. And then they did translate it into other languages as the need came. So if you have something that you want to translate, and keep it simple, do not complicate it. As the simplest, the more simple it is, the cheaper the translation is. Feedback. Your feedback is very important because there is no way to monitor how the interpreter is doing his or her job. And your feedback, whether it's good or bad, and especially if it's bad, we want to hear it. Everybody wants to hear it who have interpreters, because when we catch it early on, we are able to change that behavior and correct the mistakes that they're making. One mistake that is an automatic dismissal of an interpreter from our services, for example, is when they break confidentiality, because we no longer can trust them. And but any other mistakes, we will work with the interpreters so that behavior does not continue. And if it continues, then the interpreter will be fired. So some things that you are able to give feedback on. Did the interpreter arrive on time? Interpreters are supposed to be at least 5 minutes before the appointment starts to make sure they parked where they're supposed to park, they found the place, especially if it's not familiar to them. Did the interpreter do an introduction? It's very important for the interpreter to introduce herself or himself so everybody knows how she or he is going to be working. Was there a side conversation between the interpreter and the client, and the interpreter did not interpret what was said? Did the interpreter interpret everything you say, or the client, everything that your client said? So sometimes the client, you ask a question and the client goes on with a story, and the conclusion of the story is, let's say the answer is no. So the interpreter hears all of that, turns to you and says no. So no, that client talked and talked and talked. I need to be aware of what the client said, especially when we are talking about mental health assessments, for example. Whatever the client is saying, yes, and the conclusion is no or yes or whatever the answer is, but it gives you a hint on what is the next question or what do you need to explore more. So the interpreter is supposed to interpret everything. And these things you can catch on, you are able to give feedback on. Did the interpreter answer on behalf of the client? Sometimes what happens, the interpreter has been interpreting for that client in multiple agencies. So you ask a question and the interpreter already knows the answer to. Okay, but that's not her or his place to answer on behalf of the client. They should ask the question and the client. So in essence, if they answer on behalf of the client, first of all, they broke confidentiality because they are disclosing information that they knew about the client from previous assignments. Second of all, what if the client did not want to give that answer? So these are some of the things, as well as, if you noticed in the video, the facial expression of the interpreter. If the interpreter is not comfortable and they are showing it, then you want to stop that and from that session, because something is going wrong in there. My final thing is interpreters enable you to do what you do best. support and provide high quality services to your client. They are like colleagues, they are people, they are more like not even colleagues, they are more like a tool that you can use, you can work to in order for you to provide the quality service that you're aiming for, to make sure that your clients especially have informed consent and make your life easier, so to speak. But also it depends on you. The simpler the communication is, the more straightforward your communication is, the faster, the more effective the communication will be. So if you have any questions, I'm available. I'm sorry, I don't know if I ran over time, but I try to squeeze in as much as I can, Marissa.
No, this is excellent, Ohayla. Could you stop sharing your screen? Perfect. That's great. And that way I can see who's in the room. Questions? Any questions, comments? If you could use your hand signal or just looking, I don't see everybody on the same screen, or in the chat is fine. Is this information everyone knew already? Was there something that you found that you could resonated with your experiences? I'm seeing some nods on that one.
Yeah.
Brenda, did you want to make a comment about that? I just see you nodding. Brenda Farwell?
I was chuckling a little bit in the doctor's office session, because unfortunately I had some similar experiences with an interpreter, and it was just really awkward. And I felt that it was my job to protect the client I was working with to some degree. A very vulnerable individual, and I don't believe that they would have spoken up themselves to challenge the interpreter's behavior. So that it was really unfortunate, but so important. And the examples that you showed were right on. So thank you.
And sometimes the client does speak a little bit of English, and they are able to distinguish what was said and what was interpreted. So we will take their word for it, definitely. Sometimes it might, maybe the interpreter should have said it in a different way. That's a different story. As long as the interpreter is accurate, we don't care how they say it. But what we care about is the tone and if there is judgment, or making sure that the client feels comfortable, especially if they are vulnerable. Yeah, definitely.
And I'll take a question from
I'm so sorry, Marissa, one more thing. And Brenda, always feel free to call the interpreter on their mistakes. That's, it's very important to call them right there and then on it. And they should be changing their behavior and the way they are doing what they need to do. Go ahead, Marissa. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes, no, I'm sorry to have interrupted you. Fari, I'll take a question from you, and then we'll move to our second presentation. Fari?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Fari, and I work with employment planning counseling in Peterborough. We've started working with a lot of newcomers from different countries. Right, and usually we have these meetings one-on-one, so it's very challenging for us, to work with newcomers, but we try. Now, my question is, what are the average hourly rates for interpreters? We are in Peterborough; it's a small community, but I just wanted to get an idea of how much licensed interpreters charge per hour.
It varies from agency to agency, so I'm not quite sure what agencies you're working with. I could tell you right now, we cannot, our interpreters are not going to travel to your area. So most likely, if you are going to need us, it's going to be over the phone. And we have rates for nonprofit, and I believe it starts at $30 an hour. if not a little bit more. I set the rates at the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, I forget them, and then we have another meeting with the accounting. So sorry, because I don't do the dispatch on a daily basis. But minimum is 30. Minimum, it starts with minimum at 30. And there is always a minimum of 1 hour. But over the phone, the minimum is a half an hour, because the interpreter is not going to get up and leave and come back and waste time traveling. So you need to talk to different agencies, and I'll be happy to share our rates with Marissa, and she can distribute it to you guys. But you need to shop around. Yes, definitely there is differences in rates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just conscious of time, so we're going to move on to our second presentation. And I'll just introduce Leigha MacDiarmid. She works at NCC with me. She's a dedicated life skills worker, and she spent the past year in particular developing a comprehensive program for life skills, which emphasizes digital and financial literacy. She came to us with a background in international development, specializing in immigration and forced resettlement policies and programs. And now as a life skills worker, she focuses on empowering clients to navigate email, online banking, online maps, translation, and all things digital independently, so that they can have the essential skills to resettle and explore Peterborough as independent as possible. Welcome, Leigha. Thank you for joining us. And we've asked her to focus more on those tools that you might use if someone walks into your office and you don't have access to an interpreter, which is always the preferred choice. But in a pinch, what are the tools that you might be able to use? Leigha.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to join you all today. I'm just going to pull up. Oh, sorry. Marissa, can you just enable me to share my screen again? Unfortunately, I had to re-enter the meeting as my cat ran across the keyboard and exited me out. So perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. So as Marissa just said, I am the life skills worker here at NCC. So I have the privilege of working with our newcomer clients in teaching them key skills and hopefully empowering them to go out and explore their community, as well as just, get connected more within Peterborough. So as we saw from Ohayla's wonderful presentation, there was so much that I connected with because for me, myself, in my sessions, I always have an interpreter. My thing is always that these are not English lessons. I need my clients to know everything that is going on in the session. So it is very important to have the translator, but if that is not the case, or if there's other situations where we just cannot have access, there's lots of other good digital options that help to still break down those barriers and allow you to provide services or information to newcomers who may be walking through your door. So when you would use a translation app would be more if it is a quick conversation.
Just wait.
Sorry. And so if there is a quick conversation, or as well, if you have a drop-in session and somebody comes to you and their first language is not English, this would be a great time to have a translator app open. As well, these are cost-effective solutions. There is no cost attached, so it is very easily and accessible that way. Of course, as well, it is 24 hours, so we never know what situation is going to come up. And then the convenience of using a translator app, especially with all of the new developments today, they are getting better and better. And so it's just providing us more of an opportunity to expand our reach within the community and helping to make sure that our doors are open to everybody. So in terms of translation apps, there are definitely a lot right now out. On the screen here, I have 4 main ones that I typically see clients using or I use personally. The first one I have over here, the Apple Translate app. This app has very limited languages. It is easy and accessible because it is immediately on your iPhone if you are an iPhone user. So it is right there for you. It does have other things like a translator camera and provides things like conversation mode, which we'll get into in a moment. But I found the languages are extremely limited on this app and would encourage people to go out and explore more. The 2 apps I have found to be the most comprehensive in terms of their language list would be Google Translate and Microsoft Translate. Google Translate has an extremely large list of languages that you are able to use. And especially the key feature with Google Translate is that you are able to download a language. And I will show you how you do that in a couple slides. But the downloading language is a really essential key because then you are able to use the translation without any connection. So if you're worried about connection, definitely the Google Translate app is going to be a good pick for you because there's that ability there. And same thing again, it also has a translator camera. Microsoft Translate is another translation app that has really come up and developed extremely fast. There's a large language bank within Microsoft Translate. I would say it's kind of now overtaking Google Translate. Very often, if I cannot find a language on one of the applications, I will jump to the other application to see if the language is on there. So that's another important point too, to use variety of different ones to make sure that you are able to find the language your clients are speaking to make it accessible. And then also too, of course, it has a translator camera. The last app I have on here is a little bit different. This one, so ChatGPT, if anyone is familiar, this is a very accessible open AI platform that is used for a variety of things, including translate. It's very simple too. You really just go in and say, can you translate this from this language to this language? The only thing with ChatGPT is you have to be very, very distinct with your instructions. They do provide a lot of really good languages, and I have been told the interpretation is pretty decent. However, with how precise you have to be with your instructions, I kind of would advise this as being like a last resort if you are looking for a translation in a language you cannot find from any other app. ChatGPT does have the abilities, but again, it's very finicky, whereas the other applications, solely their purpose is to translate from one message to another. So it's a little bit more intuitive when you are using it. For the purpose of today's presentation, I will mainly be going through Google Translate and Microsoft Translate, as I found those are the most accessible and have the largest language bank available. Of course, a key point when we are using Translate apps is that they are always using AI. Because of this, it poses a potential security risk. And so if you are using a translation app in a meeting, it is advised not to put any confidential information within that translator app. And this is just, again, to make sure we are keeping confidentiality within our meetings. Although it is great and it has helped to rapidly develop the language banks within these apps, it does pose a great risk. So that is just always something to take into consideration when you are using a translator app. It's just the risk that it does pose. Okay. Now, I'm going to get more into the actual functions of the applications and kind of showing through the different functions. I always like to say when I first start teaching, I'm not a regular teacher, I'm a cool teacher. I love seeing my students on their phones. So if you have any of these apps downloaded and you would like to kind of follow along as I do so, please feel free to go ahead. Also, if you have any questions, please just feel free to raise your hand or type them in the chat as they come up. I find, especially with this kind of instructing, it's just a lot better to have the questions come up organically, as there may be a step or two that I have forgotten to mention. So please feel free to raise your hands. And of course, there will be a period at the end to ask any questions as well, just in case. I know interrupting someone can also be a little awkward. So for Google Translate, when you open up the app, this is what you are going to see at the very beginning. For language settings, they're of course going to be down here. Whatever language is here is what we are going to be translating to and from. For the language from, there's a large bank that we can select from. If you are unsure of the language that the person is speaking, you can always select detect language. If you are not sure if it is Arabic, Dari, Farsi, Pashto, selecting detect language may help you a little bit. However, if you know the language the person is speaking, that's when we should properly select the language in both columns to make sure we get the most accurate translation. So of course we have the translation from, and then the same thing with the translation to. This is with Microsoft. Microsoft, again, because of the rapid development that they have, their language settings are a lot more comprehensive. So if you are finding that, first of all, if there is a specific language you are looking for that is not available on Google Translate, it may be on Microsoft. For example, I use Microsoft for any Pashto translating because there is a speech output, and whatever I type into the translation app, it is actually able to read it out in Pashto, which is very important for any of my clients who may be illiterate and using translation as a way not only to translate messages, but also to be able to listen to them as well or have them read out. So for Microsoft language settings, same thing as Google Translate, they are just right down here at the bottom. Where they differentiate is that when you go to the language settings, first of all, if you see that there is a person beside it with kind of the voice or sound signal, that means that that is able to also have a speech output. And the speech output would then be able to read out the message that has been translated. So for example, if I'm translating from English to Pashto, here the Pashto message will be able to be read out loud. So this is important if you are working with somebody who is illiterate in their first language and in English. Having that speech output especially is very key. So if we see that, that's a good sign that we are able to listen to the messages. If we see that there's like a little world icon beside it, this means that we are able to select more of what the dialect that we are looking for. So here I can select French. When I select it will bring me to this screen over here. that gives me the options of I can pick Canadian French, France French, or Switzerland French. Since we are in Canada, I picked Canadian French, and that will give me this screen here. So it shows me my region selected is Canada. And then I can also, if I really want to, select the voice that is being spoken. So here we have Jean speaking Canadian French. Again, this just really helps to make sure the translation is as accurate as possible. It's very difficult with a translator app. So having these extra steps and these extra settings, although they are tedious, it does make a difference to ensure that everything we are saying is to the most accurate. So, as I mentioned, with Google Translate, one of the key things that is very important for our clients, and so this is something I would definitely like to pass along to you as well, is that on Google Translate, you are able to download a language. So, if we go up to our little icon at the top here, that's on all the Google apps to kind of get to our accounts. When we go up here in the Google Translate app, you're able to find download a language. It's just the second option right here. This will then pull up a list of all the different languages we are able to download. So here we can see up at the top, I already have a couple downloaded. English comes pre-downloaded, but then of course I have French and I also have Arabic. To download one, we just go to the side icon here with the download button and press it, and then we can just directly get it onto our phone. This does create some limitations in terms of the functions of apps. Sometimes it turns off the speech to text function or a speech output function, so for listening to the messages. However, and what I always stress to my clients is that in an emergency situation, at least I know that you have a way to ask for help or to go ask somebody for directions. And so again, if you are going somewhere or working with somebody and you are concerned about your connection, then downloading the language is always a good option as well. Or of course, if you are just a community member and working with clients within the community out and about, having the apps, the language downloaded does also really help as well. So then navigating the main page of the translation app. So of course, when we will open up the app, it is just going to look like this. So we have our languages down at the bottom that we always set first. And then from here, I'm able to just tap on the screen and write my messages or copy and paste any messages that I may have into direct translation, or I'm able to touch the microphone to speak. Once I have a translation, I can use this button down here to copy the entire message. Say if I am communicating with a client over text or through email, then I can use this and directly copy and paste the message to the other application. I can always press on the speaker in order to listen to the translation as well. Or sometimes if I'm not confident in my own pronunciation, I will press it to have it read out, because hopefully that would be a little bit more accurate and the client would be able to understand better. And of course, if we want any new translation, we can go down here to the bottom button in blue for new translation. This is generally just the standard method of translation, and this would be really good if, again, we are translating a message or if we are having a short conversation as well. Down at the bottom here, though, I want to highlight there is conversation mode. Conversation mode is a little bit different because it provides this microphone here that listens to both languages, and it will constantly be listening throughout the conversation. And anytime it hears English, it will translate to, for example, Spanish. And anytime it hears Spanish, it will translate then to English and constantly be running. So this is a really good mode if you are having a longer conversation with somebody, if you are having maybe an informal meeting, or if somebody has come into your drop-in session. This is a great way to have a longer conversation translated, and also have it constantly running. Also, too, you do not have to switch back and forth. So have it translate from English to Spanish, and then now I have to go back and change my language settings. You do not have to do that at all, because it provides both an English button, a Spanish button for when I want, or I can just click the middle speaker button and it will listen for both languages. In Microsoft Translate, the translation mode and the conversation mode have been put all together. So if you are using Microsoft Translate specifically, you will not find a conversation mode. And that is because this speaker button does everything all together. And so that's why we can kind of see the little the stars. When we see the stars on the microphone, that means it will translate both. If you see two separate microphones, there's one in green for English and one in gray with a line out. That just means that there is no speech input for that language. So you will not be able to use conversation mode fully, and then it would just act like a normal one-way translator. But if there is a speech input and output for both languages, we are able to use the conversation mode in Microsoft and just press that button, and we can just go ahead with our normal conversation. I do actually have quite a few clients who use this with our meetings, and they are very helpful, just even to make sure that what they are hearing is correct. I've had so many clients say, I wish that there was just everyone had subtitles. It would be so much easier if we all had subtitles. So this is kind of what it acts like. Another key mode that is in both Google Translate, the translator app on Apple, as well as Microsoft Translate, is a translator camera. So this camera, I always say it's really great for navigating the community. So we can see here, if I was out and about, I can just press on the camera icon. So here we have it down at the bottom beside the text box on Microsoft, and for Google, it is just down here on the bottom right-hand corner that says camera. We are able to then just use that camera and point it to get a direct translation on top of whatever the camera is seeing. So a great example here is I have a stop sign and it will translate from English to Spanish, and we can see it just says stop across it. I am then also able to listen to the translation if there is any concern with that. And also I can select the text if I'm wanting to copy and paste that word anywhere. Where I see the translator camera really coming into play, especially within community organizations and helping people out within the community, is especially in filling out forms. This is kind of the key area that I teach clients to use their translator app, other than the grocery store or something. But if you are filling out a form, I'll just zoom in so we can see a little bit better. I just have a mock form here. If I was filling out a form with a client, I always suggest that they use the translator camera to take a picture of the form so that then they are able to see all of the different fields and fill out appropriately. So we can see here now, once I have translated it from English to French, I am able to read that this is a medical form, and I can use this now kind of as a guide to see where do I write my name, where can I write my address, my telephone number, etc. This can also be really good as well for reading longer emails or any kind of lengthy document or information that is needed to be translated, as opposed to copy and pasting. We can always take a screenshot and then upload the picture, or if we have the hard copy of the form directly in front of us, we are able to use our phone to just take a picture right there. So yeah, so you also have the option to always upload a picture as well. But the translator camera is really great in helping, especially with navigation, as opposed to just strictly translation. Yes, okay. So I just have some general tips now for when you are using a translator app. First and foremost, and as I've shown you, there's a variety of different options, and they all have their disadvantages and advantages. So testing the app ahead of time is really key to make sure that the app has the functions and the languages that you require, and it's going to work for both you and your client, especially taking into consideration literacy levels. It's really good to make sure that there is a speech input and output if that is something you are concerned about. Also, of course, with any translating, you know, we want to speak clearly and slowly, as well as breaking down those complex sentences. So speaking in shorter terms to make sure that the translator app is keeping up with us. I always like to also use visual aids as well in my sessions. This just really helps to confirm what is being translated is accurate and that the translation and what they're seeing visually is matching up. If there is any conflicting information, then hopefully the visual cues will kind of give an indication that there might not be something properly translated, and then that can be addressed. Of course, always, again, with working with technology, we want to make sure that we are just being patient. There are a lot of great things with these apps, but they can be very finicky and frustrating. So it's always good to be patient and understand, like, there will be errors and misunderstandings, but that's where we can grow and continue to learn how to talk to when using a translator app. Of course, always double check important information. And this kind of goes back to the beginning where a translator app isn't always the solution. So if there's any really important or sensitive information, this is when we need to go to a community translator or a translation through the phone to make sure all that critical information is being reached to our clients. And then lastly, follow up in writing. So making sure that after the meeting, the client can take away something written, some kind of documentation, just to make sure that they have all the key information. So if there's anything that they are still wondering about or not sure that they quite understood, they can then go to a trusted community translator or yeah, just someone that they trust to have it translated for them and just ensure that all the information is understood correctly. And then also too, that writing just holds as a piece of helping to remember as well. I know from working with my clients, they are constantly inundated with information. And so this is something I use in all my sessions. And I always make sure that there is a takeaway handout hitting up all those key points. And so this can also just help to reinforce and make sure that the translation has been accurate and all the important information has been relayed back to the client. Yes. Okay, great. I don't think I saw any questions or hands up, but I would just now like to take some time, since I've just rambled off to you, if there are any questions.
Leigha, would you like to stop sharing your screen? And that way
Yes.
we can see the group.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very practical walkthrough. I think we've all dabbled a little bit, maybe, most of us, but not necessarily knowing all the possible features that are there and some of the things to consider, including literacy levels of our clients and languages that are maybe more unusual and are not always available. Questions, comments, either in the chat or with hand up, anyone?
Sorry, I also just forgot to mention, I did put in a little handout. As I mentioned, I like having a little takeaway written thing. So there is just a little handout with a bunch of the tips that I talked about today for when you're using translator apps as well. So that's just in the chat.
Excellent. Questions, comments? I see Brenda.
I'm just curious, will we be sent the slides from the presentations today? Is that an option?
Yes, I'm going to ask Ohayla for the slides. We also are recording this, so the recording will be available as well. I haven't, Ohayla unfortunately had to go to another meeting, so she did leave in the middle of Leah's presentation, but I will check back with her on that for sure. And I think Leah's slides would be available. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I can make them available. They're mostly just like the pictures of the app, but yeah, absolutely.
Hi.
Yes.
I can't find my little hand up thing. I don't know where it went. I just wanted to say thanks so much. I found that both presenters very helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions for today, lots of information. We were hoping that this would be a very practical session for folks. So thank you all for coming. If you do have other questions, please don't hesitate to get back in touch with us, either through me or directly with Leigha or Ohayla. And we will definitely follow up with more information around interpretation services, because this is a very important service that we need to provide for our clients in order to make our services accessible, whether you're at the university, Children's Aid Society, employment services, mental health, any services that I think that are in the room here today could benefit from using interpretation. All right, well, I think we just hit about 2 o'clock. So without any other questions or comments, I will wrap up for today. And I hope some of you will, there's another session in about half an hour. It gives you a little bit of a stretch break, but please do attend the other sessions that are happening today as part of the Peterborough Immigration Partnership annual meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thanks very much to our presenters, Leigha and Ohayla. Fantastic information. We really appreciate it. And have a great day, everyone.